get in here. Whoa, okay. I think are we good? Can we find ourselves?
Fantastic.
Yeah, okay.
How cute.
Look at us being cute. Hey guys, it's Krista again, and Emily as well. You take the lead today.
Well, I have an upcoming retreat coming up, and it's at Kripalu Yoga Center, which is in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And it's April 9th through the 14th, and it's a holistic retreat. We look at a lot of different component parts. The two component parts that we really focus on are both the elements of detoxification for the body as well as nutrition. And one thing that I like to incorporate as well is just the modalities of pranayama, meditation, and myofascial release, which help the body to relieve stagnant energy and also allow the body to begin to unravel some of the tension and the tightness we get during the winter months. So this retreat is very holistic. It's super fun and rewarding for me. And today I wanted to talk to Krista to invite her to speak about some of her personal preferences within the nutrition world or studies within the nutrition world that I can share with the people who will be attending my retreat and also just my general audience.
That's super exciting. I have heard amazing things about Kripalu, and
beautiful.
Yeah, I haven't been out yet. I'll have to make it to a detox one time. Yeah. But yeah, let's dive in. I'm gonna get comfy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my first question for Krista is why detox? What is the importance of a detox, and how does this affect our bodies?
Well, I mean, I think you and I talk about stuff like this a lot. We're just, especially in places like Toronto, where I'm from, and probably a lot of people tuning in right now are, and LA especially, our bodies are just being bombarded with pollution and toxins, and let's face it, we're not always making the best choices when it comes to food. Even those of us who are like really into health and nutrition, are going to go out sometimes and eat things that probably have GMOs in them and probably have sugar, or we're going to have a drink or whatever. And I'm not saying that these things across the board are bad, like I want to go out and have a piece of cake occasionally and really enjoy it, and that's totally cool. But there comes a point where like our bodies just seem to get overloaded, and our liver isn't able to do its job as well as it's supposed to, and our kidneys maybe get a little worn out and a little bit tired because of all of that, excess stuff that's coming in. And it's like, it can be the chemicals on our yoga mats, or hey, honestly, like I like a lot of eco-friendly like household cleaners and stuff, but some of them just don't work. So sometimes you have to like do a deep clean with something that's a little toxic, and I take care to not inhale all of it, but it's there, and it's part of living in this modern world, and it's great that we have all of this stuff, but it's a lot on the body. So I like to, at least a couple times a year, make time for a little bit of a detox, just to like clean all the gunk out and make sure that things are running optimally.
Yeah, I think you hit on a great point. Oftentimes when we're thinking about detox, we are only looking at the nutrition element to it that Krista just talked about. But as she said, there's so many other things that carry toxins in it, whether it be your yoga mat or your household cleaner, or just the air pollutants that your body is breaking down and trying to assimilate on a daily basis. All of these things add to that toxicity level that she was talking about, where the engine stops running as optimally as it should, and other things start to arise. And we see this very sympathetic in skin stuff, like skin stuff that comes to the surface. A lot of people get rashes and acne, dry skin, all these things from just an overload in the body. And one thing I'd like to point out too is just in my own cadaver studies and dissecting bodies, one thing I even noticed in bodies from places that are not necessarily thought of as pollutant cities, you'll still see some of that dirt from the air and pollution within somebody's lungs. So the idea that we're just ingesting food is a small part of what we're actually breaking down and pushing through the body on a daily basis. And it's so important to do these cleanses to allow the body's entire system, the network, the ecosystem, to replenish, rejuvenate, and to clear out some of that funk, heavy metals included.
Totally, yeah. Heavy metals can be huge. And I think also even just like the stress of day-to-day life and, working through our emotions, which a lot of us are not, I was going to say are not naturally good at. We are naturally good at, and we kind of unlearn that. We learn to stuff things down and not process them. And that's not necessarily causing like physical toxicity, but it can just make our insides a little more sensitive to everything. So I don't know. I just like to do that full clearing out, cleaning out.
Absolutely. And one thing we do talk about this week too is we do hit on self-image and nonviolent communication towards ourselves, which is something even I do on a daily basis, is some steps to talking to myself that don't have blame and shame and judgment and criticism, because all of these things too as well, they do start to add up in the mind. They start to create these ruminating thoughts, these ideas that we then start to perceive ourselves as. And sometimes, and not just sometimes, I think all the time, stepping out of that, taking a moment to pause that and be out of the environment to which those thoughts even come in and flow in and out, helps us to understand that those thoughts might not be real, and they might not be self-serving as well. So great point, really detoxing the mind as well, and those stress response habits we have from our own self-judgment and self-thought.
Yeah, and it really is a practice, right? It's like one of those things that like, it's so easy just to fall back into that pattern and
especially in your daily routine.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, it's one of those things where like, even if we don't feel good and we don't like where we are, it's still familiar and it's still comfortable. So, making those changes is like scary, even if it's a really positive thing. So it's so easy just to fall back on it. And I always try to remember in my mind, I did a workshop once with a woman who had been a modern dancer for years, and she worked with artists on positive self-talk, and she would literally like catch herself spiraling into it, and she'd go like, stop, change the channel. And it sounds like such a like cheesy, silly thing to do, but it really helps like when you do get caught up in it again, to have that little trigger for yourself, that little reminder.
Well, I think observation is key. Observation can be pure. You're just observing why you had that thought. And then the next thing would be feelings. What are the feelings involved in that thought? What's coming to the surface? What's bubbling for you with it? And then, processing that thought and thinking, does that serve me? Is that a right thought or a biased thought? And then, sometimes even speaking up about what you need that's going to support you and your environment, so that you can make better changes for yourself. A lot of times when we start to notice these thoughts, they have to do with personal relationships or professional relationships. And a lot of times if we can start to process these things, we can also start to speak up about what we actually need in order to be benefited, in order to let go of those ruminating thoughts. Because it typically does revolve around a relationship too, whether it be to food or to person, and our inability to relate and talk and communicate in a way that supports us. So if we can observe what the feeling is and what the thought is and how we need to overcome it and speak up about, the habits that we need to put into place to make things better, things change. But they only change if we actually have this communication.
Yeah, and I think that's where, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about like where yoga and nutrition intersect, and I think that's essentially what you're getting at right now.
Yeah.
Because it's great to start paying attention to the quality of food that you're putting in your body or that we're putting in our bodies. And maybe to seek out a nutrition expert or a healthcare practitioner who can help guide you through those things. But it's all the stuff that Emilie was just mentioning that like is uncomfortable for a lot of people and really, really hard to deal with, that becoming aware of the feelings as they come up and allowing ourselves to notice them and process them without identifying with them again. I think that's like the biggest thing, is like not getting sucked back into whatever your body is trying to process, and understanding that often when we're moving through the emotional side of things, they tend to become intensified, right? Like it's not just, oh, I'm kind of revisiting this thing that I've been carrying with me for years, this wound, this pain, this habit, this negative self-talk, whatever it is. It's as I'm trying to move it out of my body, it's becoming even more intense.
Yeah.
So having that yoga and meditation and mindfulness practice at our fingertips while we're doing that, I think is really, really the key to moving through it in a safe and gentle way that allows us to really honor the process and love and respect ourselves while we're doing it. Because I think if you don't have that piece of the puzzle, it's like, okay, well, I'm eating better, but
I'm still stuffing down my feelings.
Still stuffing down my feelings, and you're not getting this holistic experience. Because it is scary, right?
Yeah.
If you're not
Absolutely.
equipped to handle it, it's like, oh my God, what's happening? There's all this stuff that I've been avoiding, and I don't want to deal with it, and so you just stuff it back down.
Yeah.
So I love what you're doing, combining those things, the detoxification with the yoga, the movement, the meditation.
Absolutely. All those things heal, and adding in even the journaling component is a way for people to articulate and express it. Because you too, inside, can know the reality of, this isn't serving me, this isn't right for me, but still be stuffing it down in the form of not communicating it, like I said. And when we don't communicate it to ourselves in some way, specifically with journaling, we just start to stuff it back down again. And journaling really allows us to put it out there, to articulate it on paper, to have to read it visually. And a lot of times what happens when we start doing that is we start to solve our problems, don't we?
Yeah.
Because we're like, oh, it's there, and it's very clear, and I just rationalized it, and I can rationalize it, and because I can't avoid it anymore. I can't just let it sit inside me anymore. I actually have to take care of this. I have to take care of myself, and I have to fix what's no longer serving me, and let go of those habits, and retrain the neuroplasticity of my mind to make better decisions for myself that support me. Because at the end of the day, we all really deserve support, and we live in a world where there's ample amount of support, but again, we're not communicating that we need it.
Right.
And that's a huge part of a detox.
Yeah.
It's communicating your needs to yourself.
Yeah. I think also, even if that support is there, you have to be able to meet people halfway.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, if you're not opening up and allowing yourself to be vulnerable with somebody, they're not going to be that way with you. They're not going to be open to holding space for you. It has to become this like mutually beneficial, regular practice, or like you're going and you're paying somebody to do it for you, so that there's some sort of exchange there. But it takes a lot of like just courage and bravery on your part to like open up and be like, hey, I'm doing this thing and I'm exploring these feelings and this stuff, and I'm also trying to eat better and take care of myself, and like, do you want to come meet me? Do you want to come join me? And like, let's share information and experiences. And I don't know, I think that's kind of what life is all about, is connecting with people and being really real and honest in that way.
And realizing that when you're going through a detox and a cleanse, and when you start to integrate these different modalities within your life, the mutual people around you have to have a law of attraction to that, like Krista just said, because they also don't want to be talked down to, like you've been promoted and are higher now in the hierarchy of evolution and change, and you're saying like, well, I'm past these feelings and I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to eat like that anymore. I don't want to be like that anymore. We don't know somebody else's personal self-growth. We never will, right? It's their own personal journey. And a lot of times, too, when we start to feel better, our relationships really shift. Absolutely. Because we start to see more so what we're attracted to, what we're in line with, and we start to realize that we don't want to be wagging our finger at somebody and saying, hey, join me. We just want to see if they're attracted to joining us, right?
Yeah,
we want
definitely.
them to be ready to come on the course.
Definitely.
And it does change relationships. So just have that in mind. When you do start to do these self-healing modalities, yoga, pranayama, eating healthy, your relationships do shift. They do change.
They do, and I think it's, you know, it's only natural when you start to feel better to get really excited about things.
Yes,
and like
super excited. You're like, I feel great.
Yeah, and
I want everyone to feel
it's
great.
It's coming from a good place because you're like, I want you to feel great too. But it's not, like you were saying, it's not necessarily the right thing for that person. It's not where they are on their journey.
Yeah.
And it's really important, I think, to avoid getting caught up in the dogma and trying to like shove it down other people's throats. And if people are really curious and they're asking intelligent questions, then like awesome, share what information you have in like a really kind of impartial, non-judgmental way as best you can. It's, you know, it gets tricky to navigate sometimes. You don't know how you're gonna potentially trigger somebody or upset them, but I think that's the most important thing. And if you find a detox program or an eating plan or something that's serving you really, really well, just try to remember that there are probably a lot of things that you tried that didn't serve you. And so what you're doing isn't necessarily the right thing for your partner or your sister or your neighbor or whatever, and you need to try to respect and honor that too.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that they're growing at a less rate than you. It's just different strokes for different folks.
Or that what you're doing is somehow less valid or whatever. It's like, hey, it's working for you, like own that. Love that. Yeah.
One of the nutrition components that I wanted to talk to Krista about was this idea of fats. One thing that I get questions about quite a bit as a yoga movement therapist when my patients come in and they're asking me about nutrition and things is I live this fat-free diet and I don't understand why I can't shed weight or I have no energy. And I think it's a really important and interesting topic to talk about because there is such a bad rap around fats in general and what they do for the body. And they are incredibly essential for the body. They're building blocks for the body. And even when we're doing a detox, it's crucial to be adding fats to the diet so that we feel satiated. Am I correct? So that we don't actually go back to those trigger foods or those trigger things that create these moods in us that again make us then self-criticize and go back to that inner child and do bad things. So would you talk a little bit just about your information on fats and how you can even use them in a cleanse?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had like so many thoughts, just like little tangents jumping out of everything that you said. I would say my favorite thing is that you naturally said they're essential to our health and well-being, and something that we talk a lot about in the nutrition community. And we're like really like rocking with some music in the next room now.
Urban Med LA.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. If you're in LA, come check it out. I'm in love. Come check Emilie out. There are essential fatty acids and there are essential amino acids from proteins. These are things that like we need to survive and thrive. We really can't live optimally without healthy fats and adequate protein. And again, like it's about knowing your context. You know, some people are going to need more protein than others. Some people are going to do better with a higher fat diet. Some are going to do better with more moderate levels. But these things are really, really important. And sometimes you see detox programs that are all about, you know, juicing for long periods of time, and they exclude everything else. Again, you know, maybe they have their place in somebody's life on that person's journey. Maybe there's something that they need to experience there. So I'm not trying to like knock that specifically, but they do make me a little bit apprehensive when they go on for too long, because we really do need those building blocks, the amino acids and the proteins to keep our muscles functioning and everything. And the fats come into play with like cognitive function, just allowing our brains to run efficiently and helping us work through or eliminate that brain fog, that like kind of foggy feeling. They can really work to circumvent that slump that a lot of people feel midday, because it's this like really, really lovely, clean, slow burning energy. And the satiety factor is huge. I find, a lot of people are still hungry after they've eaten a full low-fat meal. And it's adding, a small amount of fat to that really fills us up and makes us feel like, oh yeah, I just had like a really delicious, satisfying meal.
Yeah.
I'm like a huge nerd when it gets into the effects on our hormones.
Which is something that I have personal experience with, having hypothyroid disease my whole life. I was born with it.
Yeah.
And just in speaking of that, adding healthy fats to my diet first thing in the morning has really helped as I've gotten into my mid-30s with hormone balancing hugely. So please continue.
Oh, absolutely. It's whether it's our stress hormones, our sex hormones, you're looking at your thyroid, adrenal glands, any of those things, the right types of fats can be so incredibly nourishing because they send a signal to our body that we're safe, that there is enough food and high quality foods. I've seen upping healthy fats have an incredibly positive effect on the nervous system as well.
Yeah.
Personally, and with clients and friends and family. Dealing with just stress and anxiety on top of it. There's a lot of research going on to support what Emilie was saying about thyroid health and glandular health and hormonal health. And we're starting to see some fertility experts publishing a lot of data on the importance of fats, which is really cool because like I have a background in anthropology too, and people don't always put two and two together. I'm not saying that a paleo diet is the be-all and the end-all, or right for absolutely every person, or great for all times in our life, but it's something that I've done a lot of my clinical work on and a lot of my research on because it's so closely linked to anthropology.
Yeah.
And it's like, anthropologists have been looking at tribal eating patterns for years and have known that fats are like the most prized thing, and often ancestral tribes would keep the fatty parts of animals or like the coconut meat or the fattier fish and save them for women who were looking to get pregnant or who had recently become pregnant in the tribe, because they knew instinctually that it was so incredibly nourishing to the endocrine system.
Yeah.
and so vital to making our bodies feel safe so that they can function properly and so that the baby can grow and fully develop. And it really makes you wonder. You're seeing more and more thyroid issues and fertility problems and all of these things, and a lot of us grew up during a time when like fat was really demonized.
Low-fat diet.
It was low-fat everything.
Low-fat everything.
And it's like, more research has to be done, absolutely, but it's like, could we have potentially avoided this or some of this?
Absolutely.
If we hadn't freaked out about fat.
Yeah.
And I don't know about the people that you're working with, but I know a lot of people that I speak to, their biggest concern, even if they understand, like, okay, yeah, this all makes sense to me, their biggest concern is, oh my God, am I going to gain weight?
I think that brings up a really great point, because this is one thing that I see all the time when I start to do these detoxes as well, is that people are so drawn into a low-fat diet that contains quite a bit of sugar, and they don't understand how important it is to cut back on that sugar and put in these fats as a way to re-energize the body, to balance the body, as we've been talking about, but also to help you eliminate sugar, which is huge.
Sure, yeah, it helps with cravings a lot.
Yeah.
I have a colleague who likes to distill that down and always say to people who are newer to the concept, just remember, fat burns fat, sugar packs fat.
There you go. That's a great one. Say that one more time.
Fat burns fat, sugar packs fat.
And it does. And you see that in these low-fat diets, is that they're just so high in sugar.
Yeah.
And sugar alcohol.
Right, because if you remove the fat, it tastes like cardboard.
Yeah.
So they, food scientists had to come up with a way of making these foods appealing to people. Yeah. So it's like we're taking all of that fat out, all of that stuff that is actually really good, and we have to fill it up with something, and it has to be something that is inexpensive, delicious, because let's face it, most sugary things, if you're accustomed to eating them, are.
Yeah.
Emily and I have been off of them for a long time, and I'll often go out somewhere and people are like, have a bite, have a bite, have a bite, and I'm pretty good at saying no when I don't want it, but on occasion I'll be like, oh yeah, that does look really good, I'm gonna have a treat, and it's like, I take that first bite and it's just like, whoa, what is going on in here? People eat this? This is horrifying. But yeah, I don't know, I personally have not had any issues adding fat into my life and seeing all of a sudden body fat hanging everywhere. Emily has not either.
And they're essential, again, they're essential to the body. And one thing to note is that so often when we do these cleanses and these detoxes, the hardest part is eliminating sugar, and is coming off of that sugar high, that induced sugar high we're on all day long.
Yeah.
The spikes of insulin in the body and all the component parts related to that, it's hard. It's
right.
very hard for people to come down off of it.
And those spikes, those ups and downs, that crash and then the craving for more can actually suppress your immune system too.
Absolutely.
So I think it's like when we consume sugar, our immunity is lowered for about 4 hours. Well, if we're eating something that's sugary or has a lot of refined carbohydrate in it, which turns to sugar in the body, every 2 to 4 hours anyway, our immune function is just always kind of low and sluggish, and that's when you find that you catch everything that goes around, and it just never ends. It just never ends.
And it's hard to sleep when you eat a lot of sugar as well.
Definitely, yeah.
It really does mess up
a huge difference.
The rhythm of the body.
Yeah. I think something that also has happened recently that I'm really excited about, we still have a ways to go, and I do want to be really clear that I'm not making any medical claims, I'm not a doctor, but this is something you can Google and look into, is the American Heart Association has reneged their claims about fat being linked to heart disease.
Yeah, I read this.
That evidence was actually very, very weak and had been cherry-picked, and it's unfortunate that it got us to the place that it did, but they're not stepping forward and saying that it's totally okay yet, even though there's a lot of research saying that it is, but they're no longer saying that it increases your risk for heart disease. And that's huge, for an association like that, to have made that claim for so many years, and to finally have just kind of swept it out of all of their materials and the way that they function, that's really big. So I think it's things like that that are finally going to help people who are resistant to the idea come around. Because it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that maybe we've been given the wrong information for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and that's very true. Our American diet, labeled sad, is sad at this point.
And it makes you feel sad.
Yeah. And there's just so much toxicity going into our food, specifically if we're not eating organic produce, and all of this that really is foreshadowing our ability to see a different light of how we could eat for ourselves that's nutritional, beneficial, and actually is going to help us to anti-age instead of age. And we need that more than ever right now when we live in a society where it's just overwhelming in general. And balance, when we talk about balance, it's such an elusive thing. Balance in nature and in real life doesn't really naturally exist. And trying to find that in our diets, it's even harder nowadays with the convenience of grocery stores and grocery chains that might not be supplementing us with the best produce on the market, local, organic grown stuff. So we really have to take the responsibility to take care of ourselves. And in a detox, specifically the one that I'm doing at Kripalu, this is the time where we start to look at all of this, all of these lifestyle choices that we make, and how can we refine them? We don't have to perfect them, but how can we refine them to benefit us long-term health, creating new habits for sustainability, for mindfulness, for awareness, so that we do start to grow older in a way where we're supporting our bodies to their optimal health and well-being.
Yeah, I think two of the major things that really made me light up that you just said are, one, yeah, it's not about being perfect.
No.
Perfection does not exist
At all. Just like balance.
It's never going to happen. And I think getting into a mindset where you're like, okay, I'm gung-ho about this. I'm going all in. I'm going to cut sugar out of my diet completely for the rest of my life is potentially what's going to set you up to fail. Whereas if you look at it as okay, I'm going to Emilie's Detox, or I'm going to try something on my own, or, I'm going to read a bunch of books and kind of pull from this and this and come up with something that I feel is going to work for me. But I recognize that at some point in my life, I am going to be at an event in a room where there are going to be cookies and brownies and cakes or whatever it is that really lights you up and gets you excited. That's going to be there. Know that you're going to survive. It's going to be okay to eat them and taste them, and it's, quote unquote allowed. It's when we get stuck in the rigidity of it all and setting these really sort of strict absolute boundaries that these things become that much more appealing to us.
Yeah.
And then they're the forbidden foods, and we want to have them, and we end up binging, and then we cycle into guilt and shame and all this stuff, and then we're caught in the negative self-talk again, and it's just this toxic cloud of feelings and food and everything. So try to be as gentle with yourself as you can, and that sort of leads me into the other thing that you were sort of touching on, is that all of this is really about self-care and self-love, and that's what it boils down to. And I think framing it in that way makes it a lot easier when those little bits of resistance come up, oh, it's so much more expensive, and it's not accessible to everyone, and a lot of the time it's not actually that much more expensive. Especially because a lot of whole foods, and if you can't afford organic everything, check out the latest release of the Dirty Dozen list or something.
Dirty Dozen,
and pick and choose. And if it's something like an avocado with a thick peel, or a banana, or something that has a skin to it, and you can't afford to go all organic, then get the conventional of that. It's not as bad, but look at something like a peach that has very thin, delicate skin. If you're going to go out and buy a peach, try to prioritize organic, If that's too much for you, then look at how you can support your body with other detox techniques. Maybe talk to a healthcare practitioner about, an inexpensive herb or something that can help you flush some of that out of your system. Make sure you're getting enough high-quality water, all of that stuff. But when we approach all of this from a place of, I'm doing this to really love and honor myself and my body, it becomes so much easier to justify it. And to feel good about making those choices and spending that money. You're also, if you eat a chicken breast or a nice piece of salmon or some eggs, or if you're looking at a high quality vegan protein like some hemp, some nuts and seeds, things like that, and you're putting really great healthy fats with them, you're going to feel satisfied after having eaten a small amount of food compared with buying, the 2 bags of chips for $5, but you scarf down the 2 bags of chips because they're not super satisfying, and they've been engineered to be addictive.
Totally.
So I think, you know, when you compare the amount of food that you're actually eating and what it takes to make you feel full and satisfied, the cost factor is usually minimal in my experience, and you feel better about the choices that you're making, and you feel better because you're putting higher quality fuel in your body.
Yeah, and also touching upon that a bit, you know, there is an importance in eating organic food. We know that there's a lot of information about that you can find online. But the reality is if we don't push for that in our local markets, if we don't speak up and say that as an American society, that's what we want for ourselves, things won't change. So we also have to be the ones who are saying, we want to live this way because that's self-care for ourselves. That's a way of feeding ourselves. That's going to take care of our bodies. And our bodies are temples. We do want to take care of them. And just remember that the processed
you have to
food,
live in it for your whole life.
Yeah, the processed food is also cheap, right? It's cheap food. So we typically go there. I know one thing that I see a lot with a detox is that people are so used to having dessert. They have to have dessert. They have to have their sweet. And in fact, I was just in Paris for a bit with some friends, and it was very norm after a really big heavy meal that, well, now we still have dessert. We still have to have that. And so dessert becomes this thing where you go for kind of something cheap, like a bag of cookies, or, you know, just a pastry of some sort, instead of, again, looking maybe at fruit or something that might be a little more expensive, but is definitely the sugar you should eat if you're going to eat sugar, as opposed to that $1.99 bag of cookies.
Or a small amount of something that is like incredibly satisfying.
Yeah,
like
totally.
Doing something like getting a really like high quality dark chocolate. Don't worry about the like whatever. There's going to be maybe like 1 to 3 grams of sugar in a couple of pieces of it. Don't stress about that unless you're in that initial detox phase. Like I highly recommend
during a detox.
Yeah, I highly
let's
recommend
not.
taking the time to like really eliminate things during the detox. For a lot of people, doing an elimination diet, or like there are some great programs out there, like the I Quit Sugar lady is awesome, or there's like a 21-day sugar detox, a Whole30, like programs like that. I think minimum 3 weeks, ideally 6 weeks, is just like a good reset so that you can tune into what you tolerate, what you're maybe not tolerating right now, and that might change after you eliminate it for that period, but just to really get to know your body and understand it. But we're talking like after that, long term, for the rest of your life, say, you know, you're like, okay, I'm committed to healthy eating. On the whole, I want to avoid sugary things. Don't stress about a couple grams here or, you know, a little bite there. So if dessert is something you're really looking for, going for like a couple squares of dark chocolate with like some coconut butter or a little bit of almond butter on top. You could sprinkle some cinnamon. Like something like that is just so like rich and satisfying. Having the bowl of fruit. Looking at, you know, if you have a great like a Vitamix or a Blend Tech, or I don't know, there are like Ninja ones, or what, you have like a cool like really really solid blender at home or something. Look at making like your own sorbet, or there's a recipe that I made one time, and just one component of it was like mixing a little bit of grass-fed whey protein with full fat coconut milk, you know, just a small amount, and then putting a drop of stevia in, and it was like frosting. Like, it was incredible, but it was like quality whole foods and like a couple tablespoons, and I was done because it was so rich and so satisfying. But I think finding those things, whether it's like the strawberries or the watermelon or whatever it is, that really still light you up and bring you pleasure.
Yeah,
I think that's something that's often overlooked too in like the fitness and nutrition industries. And if you guys are Googling all of the things that we said, somebody I really like who talks about this stuff is Mark David. Do you know? Are you familiar with his stuff?
I am.
And it's he has a few books and his whole school, and it's all about the psychology of eating. And my training had to do with a lot of the psychological and emotional and spiritual blocks that we face around nutrition as well. But he's a huge proponent of making healthy choices that are still pleasurable, because at the end of the day, like, you have to find joy in this activity that, like, we participate in 1 to 3, maybe even 6 times a day, right? Like, depending on what suits your body. It's like, it's a pretty constant thing. And so, you know, vowing to only eat, like, grilled turkey breast and plain broccoli for the rest of your life is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and I don't eat turkey, so...
I mean, maybe that brings you joy. If that really brings you joy, then more power to you. But healthy food doesn't have to be bland, and it doesn't have to be boring. And I agree that balance is a tricky thing and probably doesn't exist most of the time. But I think finding ways of bringing joy and pleasure into your mealtime while still making conscious, healthy choices is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
To moving towards balance.
And just remembering that quality whole foods is such an important part to the diet. We really want to be looking at those foods, again, that are good for the body. And there's ample information out there about what foods are good for you, and even the Dirty Dozen list, what foods you need to buy organically in order to ensure you're not, you know, ingesting a ton of pesticides and different toxins that, again, will slow the body down over time and lead to a lot of things like leaky gut syndrome and all these other things. So whole foods is definitely the optimal diet, probably for most human beings. I don't think we were made to live on processed chips and cookies. So
Yeah, a lot of what's out there just isn't food.
Yeah,
is what it boils down to.
It's not nutritional.
It's, you know, it's called food, but it's a food product. Yeah.
One of the things Krista talks about just now that I want to dive into a little bit more and segue into is this idea of making yourself feel good. And that's really where the yoga practice comes in. Yoga in itself is a self-healing modality way of moving the body and an effort to release tension, to release tightness, and to be able to explore the body and the body's number one engine component, which is our breath. And
that's where that yoga coma that we talk about comes in.
What you'll be experiencing so much on my retreat is morning vinyasa flows, but also in the evening yin and restorative practices, because we really do need the yin and the yang to balance us and to bring us back to center. So in speaking of that, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our own mindful tips that we do in our lives as a way to keep us in optimal health. And for me, practicing yoga really is the number one thing. There's a lot of different limbs to yoga. I won't go into that, but one limb is meditation. And I think a meditation practice is absolutely important in order to get centered and clear, and to be able to observe the voice, to observe the inner child within us all that oftentimes isn't our best supporter, isn't our number one fan, and really being able to evaluate our thoughts in a non-judgmental way to see what's serving us and what's not serving us. And during a cleanse, it's the perfect time. All that stuff will come to the surface, specifically because we're not in it, we're not inundated with it, and we'll be able to kind of pick and choose what thoughts serve us and start to really look at the thoughts that don't and why they keep reoccurring and what we need to do in order to really let those things go. And by letting those things go, you know, the yoga comes in, the asana work of moving it out of the body, physically, emotionally, energetically. We've got to move those old habits out of the body. And what we start to come back to again and again and again is just this wholehearted person lying within us who doesn't actually believe those thoughts that don't serve us. So yoga is a huge component of my life. Meditation is a huge component of my life. Any other mindful things that you practice that are a huge part of your life?
You know, sometimes it just boils down to reminding myself to take some deep breaths.
Absolutely.
You know, I think the majority of people out there, maybe not in LA, but the majority of people out there hear a lot about yoga and meditation and mindfulness, and you know, like, let's face it, we live in a world where, like, Instagram yoga is the yoga that most people are familiar with. So when we talk about these things, they think that, like, they're going to go to a class and be expected to like balance on one elbow upside down with a big smile on their faces. And like, let me tell you, I've been practicing for almost 15 years and I can't do that. And it's okay. I don't need to do that right now. It's cool if you can. It's awesome. It's a cool goal to have. But just finding something as simple as being able to become aware of when we're getting caught up in the busy, in the, oh my God, I have this to do and that to do, and I'm feeling a little nervous about this, and I'm feeling nervous about it because of my past experiences. One of my teachers has a PhD in trauma, and she said recently, in any given situation, about 10% of what we're feeling and experiencing is related to what is actually happening in the moment. The other 90% is all of the stuff that we're carrying with us. And she always says, we've all got baggage. The key to living a happy life is just finding the people who care about us enough to help us unpack.
Yeah.
But it's that 90% that's all of our baggage that we're projecting onto a situation. So having these practices, even if it's just those 5 deep breaths every time we get overwhelmed, that help us become aware of all of that past stuff that's packed away in our bodies, that's paramount to like working through it, to getting through this stuff. So yeah, for me it's the deep breathing. Sometimes it's putting a hand over my heart and just reconnecting with this miraculous vessel that I'm in, and like reminding myself that I'm alive and I've made it this far and everything has been okay in the end, and it's going to continue to be okay, and really making a concerted effort to slow the monkey mind down. It never stops. It never stops. That's something I hear a lot of people kind of freak out about when they're like, oh, I can't meditate, my mind is going all the time. My mind is like, it's like one of those like baby mobiles where you hang the little animals on, and it's like spinning and spinning and spinning, and the animals are flying everywhere. The meditation, the mindfulness, the yoga doesn't stop it. It doesn't like get rid of the mobile, but it like brings it down to a manageable speed. So doing things like that, I really like the exercise where, and it's great because you can literally do it anywhere, where you just kind of try to find a moment of stillness, and maybe you want to try this with us if you're tuned in right now. You literally just start to run the tip of your tongue along the inside of your mouth, your lips. So it just kind of looks like this. And you just repeat that very, very slowly, and that really calms the nervous system down and makes you much more present, just focusing on a little thing like that.
And just so you know, with mindfulness tools, what we're looking at here is an ability to start a new habit that's allowing us to stay away from an old habit, like replacing bad habits with things that allow us to become aware again. The process of the deep breathing, the process of practicing yoga is to just make you more aware of your body in the present moment. Because the past is the past, and it's gone, and the future doesn't exist. So it's really just about bringing you back into the present moment. And, you know, a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of meditation, whether or not the monkey mind is at play, there's a lot of research that supports the benefits of just learning to sit with yourself for 5 minutes, honestly, learning to be still with yourself and giving your body and mind the space. The space is so important to be able to process things. You know, when we can process things, we can eliminate what's no longer serving us. Yeah. But when we're in this state of flux, like she just said, with the mobile mind, it's almost important, or it becomes almost impossible for us to process things. So you want to be thinking that these mindfulness tips aren't things that you have to practice all the time and all of this, but it's just something to bring you back into the present when you're spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
Now, with the deep breathing, I think 5 breaths is good, but I think more importantly, you should count the inhales and the exhales, because you might just rapidly go through some 5 deep breaths. But if you can sit down and close your eyes and lift your spine and count the breath on an inhale to 5, and then count your exhale on 5, that's going to slow you down a little bit more and put you a little bit more back into your body. On top of that great trick of running your tongue against your mouth, that could be part of it as well.
Yeah, I forget that sometimes. I was a competitive synchronized swimmer for years, so like my definition of a deep breath is sometimes a little bit different.
Yeah, well, I don't want you to like
other
lose
people's. Yeah, so if it's a 5 count, if you're starting out and it's new to you and you can only do a 2 or a 3 count, then start there and build up to maybe 8 or a 10, or it's a very pretty girl waving at us on the roof.
And one thing that I think is a huge mindful habit that I'd like to end with that is chewing your food all the way. Mm-hmm. For me, I actually have a hard time eating out with people and even eating with my own friends and family, because I find that most people don't chew their food all the way. So they eat so quickly and they swallow their food so fast that they're not taking the opportunity to not just savor the food, but to literally start to digest the food before it goes internally down into the body. And it's super important as animals for us to chew our food thoroughly and to break it down with our saliva before we actually swallow it. And in that chewing process, we fire up those digestive enzymes, and our body becomes more aware and more present to when we'll be full. And I don't know about you, but I'm sure you've had meals with people and or yourself where you've scarfed down a huge meal, and it could be a wholehearted meal and be great wholesome foods, and you're still not satisfied because you scarfed it down. And your body's not going to process it. A lot of times this is what leads to inflammation in the stomach and the GI tract. So one of the mindful things that I'd like to impart on you for this week is really looking at how you actually eat your meals. And this ability to maybe take a couple deep breaths before you eat, mm-hmm. to practice some kind of mindful thing or after yoga, but also to thoroughly chew your food. So that you're actually allowing your body this opportunity to break down those nutrients, to absorb those nutrients, and for you to be filled up and repaired. Your body is food. That's the long story.
It's the slowing down in general, just to kind of wrap that up, is the whole digestion thing, the whole digestive process begins when we see our food before it even enters the mouth. We take it in, and it signals are sent to our brain and our stomach, which is our second brain, if you've been reading up on this stuff, that we're about to consume food, and it primes the digestive tract. We put the food in our mouths, and the enzymes in our saliva actually begin to be released, and we start digesting that food as we're eating it. But on top of that, the slowing down, again, gives the signal to the nervous system that, like, we're safe, we're not running from a tiger that we were trying to hunt for dinner or whatever. It's okay to focus our energy on processing and digesting the food. When we remain in that state of being, hurried and busy and stressed out, the hormones that are being released signal to to our brain that it's not okay to focus our energy on that process, that it's not safe, that we're still fleeing, that we're still stuck in that fight or flight mode. And that doesn't work out well long term for any of it.
That's a huge takeaway to this Kripalu retreat. Again, when you take a break from things that you use to sympathize the body, to make the body feel like it's safe, such as chocolate, which becomes a big one for people. Yeah. When we use different tools that we're doing over and over again, and even habits that we have, we oftentimes never get the results that we're looking for. But at Kripalu, because we're in this safe environment, and because we're taking the opportunity to put these mindful things into place, what you'll notice is that when you slow down, when you take a moment to pause, when you put on the back burner all that other stuff, your body naturally heals. And
Yeah.
that is such an incredible part about the body itself,
Yeah.
is that a detox really can heal you. And it's not about starvation, and it's not about, any of these mainstream things we see, like I have to lose weight. Your
It's
body
not about
will,
self-punishment.
No,
That's
exactly.
what those things are.
Absolutely. Your body will recalibrate in a way where you actually do shed the pounds from meditating on good habits.
Yeah.
And from putting those things into place. And like you just said, at Kripalu, one thing that we do is, as we take a time to really evaluate the food that we're going to eat and how we're going to enjoy that food in the company of the people we're around, and being in an environment where we're allowed to enjoy that food without feeling punished. And I'm telling you, people really walk away going, oh, I can enjoy this again. And I'm such a victim to that myself. With my busy schedule here in Los Angeles, I oftentimes tell myself, you can't eat. You have clients to see, you have stuff to do, and it's almost become, in a couple years of my life, a shameful thing, a shameful habit of, well, how can I slow down to feed myself when I have so many other people I need to serve? And I really had to go in and do some work on myself to remember the value of food and eating, and that I wasn't punishing myself for taking a meal and taking a break from seeing people, but I was actually replenishing myself. And that nourishment, above all things, mindful nourishment, emotional nourishment, food, physical nourishment, this is what keeps us going. These are the tools to life. This is what brings happiness, joy, and self-love. So just remember that life is about nourishing yourself, and we're just here to offer you some vital tools to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
So again, my retreat is at Kripalu. It's a huge yogic center in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. We have a wonderful gang of people already signed up, and a lot of repeat people from last year. And I think one thing that you'll find from this retreat, just like we've been talking about, are just these small little things to be looking at and focusing our awareness to, that lead to great changes.
Yeah.
And allow us to really take control. And let me tell you something, making these changes is empowering. It really is. And when we feel empowered, we want to empower other people. And this is what starts the evolution of change. This is what starts the revolution of love and kindness. And that's really yoga on and off our mat.
Because then it becomes about lifting other people up instead of
Absolutely.
viewing everything as a competition
Yes.
or trying to compare all the time. What is the very famous quote? Comparison is the thief of joy.
It really is.
That's exactly it, right there.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people watching this are going to already be in touch with Emilie, in contact with her. If you're not, your website is emilieperzyoga.com, right?
Emilie Perz Yoga, that's EMILIEPERZ yoga.com.
Also sometimes known as, what is it, Emilie Perz.
Yes.
But even if you Google that, she comes up.
If you do Google that, you'll just see images of my face too.
Yeah, there you go. Some cool yoga poses that she has mastered that should not be intimidating to anybody. But check her out, sign up for her newsletter. I get it, and I really, really cherish and value all of the information that comes from there.
Thank you.
And if you're into this world and you dig it, or you're getting into it and you think it's fun and interesting, I am working on a fun comedic series called Wholesome Foods I Love You. Is that okay? And you can check out our website at www.wfily.com. That's for wholesomefoodsIloveyou.com. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go hug somebody.
Yeah.
And eat a healthy snack.
Embrace.
Bye, guys.